For more than a decade, millions of viewers around the world became deeply familiar with the image of Mike Wolfe, the man with the bright smile, traveling across the American states in his van, searching for hidden treasures inside the crumbling barns of the show American Pickers. Glamour, success, and wealth were all people saw when they looked at him. Yet when the cameras stopped rolling, Mike Wolfe's real life became a chain of suffocating tragedies stretching all the way into 2026. A horrific traffic accident that nearly claimed his life, a multi-million-dollar divorce that shattered a marriage lasting nearly a decade, and ultimately the death of his closest friend, Frank Fritz. For years, Mike was turned against by millions of fans, condemned as the selfish villain who forced his best friend out of the television show. Why did he choose to remain silent and endure the crushing weight of public opinion? What brutal truth had been hidden behind the scenes? The answer will completely change the way you see this man. To understand Mike Wolfe's stubborn resilience, his extraordinary ability to endure pressure, and his unique outlook on life, we must travel back to the storm-filled years of his childhood. Mike was not born into privilege, nor did he have any glamorous support system from his family. Born in 1964 in the state of Illinois, young Mike Wolfe's childhood was painted in shades of hardship and scarcity. He and his siblings were raised entirely by a single mother. In a household where financial survival was always hanging by a thread, hunger and poverty were constant realities. It was precisely these harsh conditions that unintentionally shaped Mike's survival instincts and unusual business philosophy from an early age. At the age of 4, while other children were playing with brand new toys, Mike had already begun wandering quietly through rubbish dumps and scrapyards in search of anything that could still be useful. To young Mike, the rubbish heap was not a filthy place filled with discarded junk, but an open treasure chest containing forgotten stories. Mike's first hard-earned business lesson came when he discovered an old, rust-covered bicycle abandoned in a public bin. Using his tiny hands and natural curiosity, Mike cleaned and repaired the bike before selling it for $5, no small amount of money for a poor family in the 1960s. The moment he held that $5 note in his hand, a revelation flashed through his mind. What one person considers rubbish can become another person's treasure. That simple philosophy would become the guiding principle for his entire career. And it was also during those teenage years spent searching for old items across Iowa that fate brought Mike together with Frank Fritz. Two teenage boys, one thin and energetic, the other heavier and reserved, instantly connected through their shared passion for picking. Together, they searched every corner they could find, splitting old cans and rusted metal toys between them. Their friendship, which would last nearly half a century, began in such pure simplicity before money, fame, and the darker side of the television industry transformed it into a heartbreaking tragedy. Emerging from the scrapyards of his difficult childhood, Mike Wolfe did not stop at simply surviving. Running through this man's veins was a passion for speed, nostalgia, and a vision far ahead of his time. He knew he needed to go further and accumulate more if he wanted to turn picking into a true art form. Before becoming a television star, Mike Wolfe lived a life deeply connected to wheels and motion. From 1989 to 1998, he was a professional bicycle racer. That passion not only gave Mike remarkable endurance, but also opened the door to a new business path. In order to raise capital for bicycle shops, Mike made a bold decision: to hunt down, restore, and resell rare vintage motorcycles. Rust-covered Harley-Davidsons and Indians, hidden deep within remote farms, were transformed by Mike's craftsmanship into assets worth tens of thousands of dollars. Mike spent more than 20 years traveling across America. Alone in his truck, he searched through barns and basements, building an enormous wealth of knowledge about antique history, while creating an extensive network of contacts ranging from small-town locals to elite collectors. In 2000, he officially founded Antique Archaeology in LeClaire, Iowa, a small antique shop carrying enormous ambition. However, Mike Wolfe realized that the real treasures were not merely the antiques themselves, but the stories behind them and the eccentric people he encountered along the way. He conceived the idea for a reality television program, It became a lonely and almost obsessive journey of perseverance. Mike spent 5 consecutive years filming short videos himself, writing scripts himself, and knocking on the doors of television networks throughout Hollywood. Everyone rejected him, convinced that audiences would never watch 2 middle-aged men digging through other people's junk. But Mike refused to give up. His persistence was finally rewarded in 2010 when the History Channel agreed to test American Pickers. The moment the first episode aired, it created a television phenomenon. The authenticity, simplicity, and fascinating historical knowledge shared by Mike and his lifelong friend Frank Fritz instantly captivated viewers. The program achieved record-breaking ratings with more than 3.1 million viewers in its very first season. At several points, American Pickers even outperformed major entertainment giants such as American Idol within key audience demographics. Mike Wolfe, once an unknown picker emerging from obscurity, officially became a millionaire and one of America's most influential television personalities. Yet fame at the highest level always comes with deadly traps. While American Pickers was sitting at the peak of its success, Mike's childhood friend Frank Fritz suddenly disappeared from the program in 2021, triggering a wave of outrage directed squarely at Mike. People condemned him as greedy and accused him of betraying his brother-like friend. But what was the truth behind this so-called bitter feud? Keep watching to find out. The dazzling success of American Pickers suddenly cast a shadow of darkness when fans noticed Frank Fritz's absence in 2021. Immediately, sensational media outlets crafted the perfect narrative of an explosive conflict, a deep rivalry fueled by money and fame between 2 lifelong friends. Mike Wolfe suddenly became the center of public criticism, branded a selfish traitor who had pushed his closest companion out of the game once he had achieved success. But behind Mike's unsettling silence lay a completely different story. The truth behind Frank Fritz leaving the program in 2021 had nothing to do with financial conflict. After years spent traveling in the van, Frank's health had severely deteriorated due to serious back injuries caused by repeatedly lifting heavy items. In an attempt to cope with the constant physical pain, Frank gradually fell into addiction involving pain medication and other substances. Strict History Channel regulations prohibited any on-air personality from appearing without passing a negative drug screening. Frank was unable to pass that test. Instead of speaking publicly to defend his reputation and the show, Mike Wolfe made a decision that shocked many people. He chose to play the role of the villain. For 3 long years, despite relentless backlash and cruel insults from the public, Mike remained completely silent. He knew that if he revealed the real reason, Frank Fritz's reputation, dignity, and entire life would be destroyed before the public eye. Mike used his own honor as a shield, protecting the darkness and vulnerability of his closest friend. Their relationship was never truly broken the way the media claimed. Behind the scenes, Mike quietly continued to monitor, support, and encourage Frank throughout his journey towards recovery and rehabilitation. Fate tested their friendship once again when Frank Fritz suffered a devastating stroke that led to severe complications. On a fateful day in September 2024, inside the silence of an intensive care unit, it was Mike Wolfe himself who remained at Frank's bedside. He sat there, tightly holding Frank's frail hand until his childhood best friend took his final breath. Frank's death became a devastating wound driven straight into Mike's heart, bringing to an end a turbulent chapter in the lives of America's 2 greatest pickers. Only now, after Frank had finally passed away in peace, did the world begin to realize the depth of Mike Wolfe's integrity, a man who honored the bond of brotherhood until the very last moment. As the studio lights of American Pickers dimmed to make room for the silence following Frank Fritz's passing, Mike Wolfe's real life continued to be tested by fractures within his own home. Behind the success of a television millionaire stood the heavy price paid in family happiness. As the studio lights of American Pickers dimmed to make room for the silence following Frank Fritz's passing, Mike Wolfe's real life continued to be tested by fractures within his own home. Behind the success of a television millionaire stood the heavy price paid in family happiness. Below is Part 5, Personal Life, a Broken Marriage, and a New Relationship. v. Personal life, a broken marriage and a new relationship. In 2012, at the height of his exploding career, Mike Wolfe married Jodie Faith, the woman who had stood beside him long before fame ever arrived. Together, they welcomed their young daughter Charlie into the world with overwhelming joy. Charlie was born with a cleft lip and palate, and Mike and his wife spent years enduring emotional strain as they supported their daughter through reconstructive surgeries. Between the relentless pressure of months-long filming schedules on the road and the battle surrounding their child's health, the connection between husband and wife gradually began to unravel. By 2020, the inevitable finally arrived. Jodie officially filed for divorce, ending a marriage that had lasted nearly a decade. The divorce extended into 2021 and consumed countless newspaper headlines. In exchange for freedom and maintaining peace for the sake of their daughter, Mike Wolfe agreed to a massive financial settlement. He paid $634,000 in cash, while also surrendering several valuable properties and part of the royalties from his television programs to his ex-wife. With his family home shattered, Mike once again found himself facing loneliness as he approached his 60th year. But life never takes everything away from someone all at once. Amid the dark days of divorce, Mike found a new light named Letitia Klein, a model, journalist, and well-known motorcycle racer. Letitia's arrival felt like the perfect missing piece for Mike's nostalgic soul. She not only understood his work, but also shared his burning passion for vintage vehicles and adventurous journeys. Since publicly confirming their relationship in 2021, Letitia has remained by Mike's side as both a companion and a strong emotional support, helping him rediscover his smile and regain balance after the relentless storms of his life. The pain of the multi-million-dollar divorce had only just begun to settle, and his new happiness with Letitia Klein had barely started to bloom when another horrifying tragedy struck. On one fateful autumn night, the line between life and death had never been thinner for America's wandering picker cowboy. In September 2025, while traveling along a dark highway in Tennessee, Mike Wolfe's vintage Porsche, one of the priceless treasures he cherished most deeply, was suddenly reduced to a mangled heap of twisted metal. A drunk driver traveling in the wrong direction lost control, sped forward at terrifying speed, and crashed head-on into Mike and Letitia's vehicle. The violent sound of metal colliding ripped through the silent night, the impact so powerful that the airbags exploded instantly and the front of the classic sports car was completely crushed. The crash scene looked so catastrophic that the first responders believed no one inside could possibly have survived. Rescue teams were forced to use specialized hydraulic equipment to cut through the steel frame of the vehicle and pull Mike and Letitia out of the wreckage unconscious and covered in blood. Both were rushed immediately into emergency care. Mike Wolfe suffered a broken nose, head trauma, and multiple severe injuries throughout his body. However, his girlfriend Letitia Klein endured even more devastating damage. She suffered fractures in 3 separate areas of her jaw, multiple broken ribs, and a collapsed lung. Doctors spent countless hours performing continuous surgeries in a desperate effort to pull her back from the brink of death. For a man who had already reached the age of 61, the accident was not merely a physical injury, but a profound spiritual awakening. Lying in a hospital bed, staring at himself and the woman he loved covered in stitches and medical tubes, Mike realized that money and priceless antiques meant nothing without health and loved ones. He described the tragedy as a second chance granted to him by God. It pushed him to simplify his life, slow down, stop throwing himself into exhausting journeys, and focus entirely on what truly mattered during the years he had left. Returning from the fragile boundary between life and death, Mike Wolfe faced a new challenge as social media exploded with waves of false rumors. Numerous sources claimed that American Pickers had officially been cancelled following his horrific accident, especially after colleague Danielle Colby hinted online about the end of an era. In order to silence the growing doubts surrounding the program, Mike Wolfe officially stepped forward to clarify its future. He confirmed that American Pickers had not been cancelled, but was simply entering a necessary hiatus. This period was essential for him to fully recover from his injuries, while also restructuring the show following the death of Frank Fritz in order to bring a fresh direction to viewers. But the legendary picker proved that his sharp mind had never stopped working. In February 2026, Mike officially launched a new program titled History's Greatest Picks with Mike Wolfe. Unlike his earlier projects, this series focused less on bargaining scenes and physically exhausting road trips, instead diving deeply into the historical value, cultural origins, and human stories hidden behind each artifact. It was widely viewed as a strategic step, perfectly suited to his current health condition and his slower, more reflective philosophy of life after surviving such a near-fatal experience. At the age of 61, Mike Wolfe's life has changed dramatically. Instead of spending 10 months each year sleeping inside a van as he once did, he now focuses more heavily on remotely managing his 2 antique archaeology stores in Iowa and Nashville. He spends most of his time in Williamson County, Tennessee, raising his daughter Charlie, caring for Letitia Klein throughout her recovery journey, and expanding a chain of vintage-style guest houses personally designed by him. A peaceful, simple life filled with authentic values is now what this wandering cowboy treasures most. After enduring so many ups and downs, Mike Wolfe still firmly believes that his own life resembles the antiques he spent decades searching for. They endure the harshness of time, become buried beneath thick layers of prejudice, and sometimes carry cracks and rust from the violent collisions of fate. Much like the death of Frank Fritz, the multi-million-dollar divorce, or the terrifying accident of 2025. Yet it is precisely those genuine imperfections that create true value, transforming an ordinary object into something priceless. The life story of Mike Wolfe, filled with blood, tears, and silent sacrifice behind the lens of American pickers, has exposed a painful truth. Television glamour may be artificial, but human loyalty and the will to survive are always real. In your opinion, does Mike's decision to silently play the role of the villain for 3 years in order to protect his best friend Frank Fritz deserve the public's respect? And are you looking forward to his return with this new 2026 project? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this emotional and thought-provoking story, please hit the like button, share the video, and subscribe to the channel while turning on notifications, so that together we can continue uncovering the shocking mysteries and hidden sides of some of the world's most fascinating figures. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you again on the next journey.